As seen in the Quick Start video series, InsightEarth provides several presets to import SEG-Y format files from known providers. To import SEG-Y files whose formats vary from the provided presets, the advanced configuration settings are used to properly specify the SEG-Y import parameters. This video will illustrate how to import a SEG-Y file using the advanced settings. There are two means to specify the input SEG-Y file. First, from the main menu, select File, Load File to launch a standard Choose File window. If the file does not appear in the directory listing, modify the file extension filter to be either All Files or SEG-Y Files. One may also select File, Import from the main menu, and the empty import window will appear. In the lower left area of this window, select Add Files to browse to the location of the SEG-Y file. In the Import window, select the SEG-Y file with a left mouse click to make it active. Next, specify Advanced Settings in the Import Settings, and the Advanced Configuration and Preview window appears. Whenever possible, refer to the SEG-Y data load sheet that has been provided by the processing shop for specific information about the survey. Sadly, a load sheet may not always be available, so the option to Show EBCDIC header is provided in the event that it may contain good information about the SEG-Y file. If selected, this information appears in its own window, which remains open so that it may be used for reference throughout the loading process. Depending on the source of the SEG-Y file, this information can be helpful for referencing and cross-checking the parameter specifications in the upcoming steps. InsightEarth pre-populates as much of the data as possible and provides it for inspection and editing if necessary. Each step provides helpful tips for the most common SEG-Y import points of failure, and the steps are provided in the required order of execution. An as-yet unavailable step is marked with an X in a red circle, and attempting to select an unavailable step will display an error message. Begin at Step 1, Read Headers. In this first step, the values are read from the line and trace headers. The line header values are read by default, populating the data format, the number of samples, the sampling rate, the lateral units, and vertical units fields. In most cases, these values are read correctly from the line headers, but if desired, select Read Values from Line Header to reread the line header information. Verify the lateral and vertical units prior to continuing on to the Read Trace Headers step. Following the verification of the line header information, select Read Trace Headers to read the SEG-Y file trace headers into memory. Once this is complete, Step 2, Configure Trace Headers, will become available. Select the tab containing Step 2, Configure Trace Headers. In this step, the byte locations of both the world X and Y values and the inline and crossline locations will be specified. An orange caution icon indicates the required inputs in each section. Begin with entering the world X and Y byte locations. The data ranges for the trace header information are shown in the byte location preview grid, which contains the byte number in the first column and the minimum and maximum values for that byte number in the adjacent columns. Use the scroll bar to inspect the data values at the various byte locations and, if possible, compare them with the values provided in the load sheet provided by the processing shop. One may also inspect the EBCDIC header to help identify the correct byte locations. In this case, the world X byte location is 189, and the associated world Y byte location is 193, which corresponds to the SEG-Y standard. Once the world X and Y byte location values have been entered, the caution icons disappear, and the Trace Layout Preview window now displays an outline and orientation of the survey. This provides a visual reference to help verify that the correct values were entered. If an incorrect value were entered, for example, a world X byte location value of 29, it shows in the Trace Layout Preview window that the results are not as expected. Reset the World X byte location to the correct byte location value prior to proceeding. World XY scale multiplier can be verified by comparing the calculated XY world coordinates as shown in the Trace Layout Preview window with the expected values that may be found in the IBCDIC header, the load sheet, or another trusted information source. In this example, the world X and Y values appear to be low, so scroll the byte location preview grid to look at the contents of byte 71, which is the default XY scale byte location. Since byte 71 contains a value of -10, the effect of using this value will reduce the XY values by a factor of 10, one order of magnitude. Select Override XY Scale to specify the desired scale factor. Observe how modifying this value affects the XY coordinate precision in the Trace Layout Preview window. The inline and crossline byte locations are specified in the next tab. Use the byte location preview grid to review the data contained at each byte location. Compare these values with the load sheet provided by the processing shop or the contents of the IBCDIC header. As seen in the IBCDIC header, the inline byte locations are either 17 or 181, and the crossline byte locations are either 13 or 185. Enter the byte locations and use the Trace Layout Preview window to provide a visual reference to verify that the correct byte location values were entered. Move to the final tab in Step 2, the Live Trace Code section. By default, the Read Live Trace checkbox is on in order to read live traces versus all trace codes. Verify this setting by reviewing the results in the Trace Layout Preview window, where live traces will display as yellow and dead traces display as red. If the live traces resemble the expected survey outline, then leave this option selected. If all traces appear as white, then deselect this option and all traces will be treated as valid trace codes and will be read. Since Step 3, Reference Points, has now become available, select this Steps tab to proceed. Begin by selecting Calculate All Reference Points. Observe the changes to the outline of the survey and note that the calculated reference points appear in the reference point preview. Verify the expected results. If discrepancies occur, the reference points may be entered from the IBCDIC header or load sheet. If the reference points have been entered manually, select Calculate Bin Sizes and Spacing. Otherwise, the bin sizes are calculated and displayed as based upon the previously determined World X and Y reference points. Next, select Verify Reference Points and set up trace gridding to verify that the world and survey coordinates match, which will also unlock Step 4, Sample Format, Clipping, and Preview. In Step 4, the primary purpose is to inspect and, if necessary, adjust the final few parameters prior to importing the SEG-Y data. If desired, one may use the Final Preview window by selecting the Enable 3D Preview option to inspect the output that will be generated by running the import while using the current settings. However, choosing this will effectively read the entire SEG-Y file, so use this option carefully, especially if the SEG-Y file is large. The Final Preview window uses the standard InsightEarth 3D display viewing controls for panning, zooming in, and rotating data in the preview window. One of the more important areas to check is the Histogram and Clipping section. Here, a user-defined percentage of the volume is used to compute data statistics, which are used to help set the data clipping range. The user can choose no clipping, in which case the entire data range of the volume sample values will be used. While this is the most complete, it will also include extreme high and low outlier values, which likely represent noise and which may be deleterious to future calculations. It is common to use a relative clipping based on a number of standard deviations from the mean or zero crossing. The InsightEarth team recommends that amplitude data be clipped to 4 standard deviations from the mean for most interpretation tasks, especially for use in automated fault extraction. However, for salt interpretation work, a suggested clipping value is 10 standard deviations. Absolute clipping values need to be entered manually, but one can use the Show Histogram option to provide a good data range. The imported volume may be reduced in size by setting the trim values for inline, crossline, and time depth. If these parameters are modified, the red outline box will be redrawn in the final preview window to visualize the size of the trimmed volume to be imported. Trimming a volume during SEG-Y loading may help to load regions of a very large survey which may not otherwise fit within a workstation's available memory. Finally, select Return to Import window to perform the import. If necessary, select and configure the coordinate conversion options. Choose either the Import Selected button or the green arrow to import the SEG-Y file. A status bar is provided to show import progress. Following a successful import, InsightEarth places the imported SEG-Y file in the data list with its name in italics, where it can be viewed and manipulated in the 3D display. If the imported file looks correct, remember to save the file to disk in an InsightEarth project by right-clicking on the italicized name and selecting Save or Save As.